Father, for thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory. Have mercy upon us.
Hello, my name is Father Timothy Tighe, and this is our 181st segment of our journey of faith in the light of the cross, in which we get deeper and deeper into the Bible. So thank you for joining us. We look up on our screen and we see our theme. The theme is Chronicles 1 and 2 parallels the history of Israel's kingdom in 1 and 2 Samuel and 1 and 2 Kings. Why God inspired a re-editing of the kingdom is essential to understanding how the Old and New Testament connect. We go on to our next screen and we read, God worked through all Bible editors in their reality, for the enemy of Yahweh was unreality and fantasy. God redeemed the chroniclers' shame and confusion as they struggled to understand the ways of Yahweh. To understand Chronicles' view of God's kingdom, it is essential first to study the restoration of Jerusalem in Ezra and Nehemiah, originally the one book of Ezra. We go on to the next screen and we read. The order of the Christian Bible, we've already had that. The Torah to 1240, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and then Joshua continues right after Deuteronomy, 40 down to the destruction of Jerusalem, and we have Judges 1 and 2 Samuel, and then 1 and 2 Kings going down to the destruction of Jerusalem. Now we're going to restoration history. 538 they returned to rebuild the temple, and we're going to see we're going to go to 390. Okay, now we go on to our next screen and we read. The chroniclers portrayed Ezra as the restorer of Jerusalem, for they wanted to de-emphasize the role of Nehemiah. Note well, NB, Nehemiah probably came to Jerusalem before Ezra. He was a powerful leader and manager, but most likely he was a eunuch. The Hebrew for cupbearer is similar to eunuch, so the chroniclers changed eunuch to cupbearer. But why would God send a eunuch to restore Judah? Yahweh left priests and scribes confused by feelings of shame, foreshadowing the shame of the disciples in the shame of the cross. Okay, we go on to our next screen and we read, Nehemiah 1:2. My brother Hanani came to Susa near Babylon from Judah. He said the captivity survivors are in distress and the city wall lies breached. This disturbed Nehemiah, so he prayed, Lord, grant me success, for I was a cupbearer, really a eunuch to the king. Now 2:1, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that would make it 445 BC. The king Artaxerxes asked, what do you wish? Nehemiah, I said, please send me to rebuild Judah. The king and the queen beside him asked him when I would return. I set an acceptable date, and the king agreed. We go on to our next screen, and we read, Nehemiah talking with the king in the queen's presence also indicated he was an influential eunuch favored by the queen who was interceding for him. So highly favored was Nehemiah that they wanted him to return. Nehemiah 2:7, if it pleases the king, send letters to the governors west of Euphrates for safe passage, also a letter to obtain timber for the temple, the city wall, and the house I will occupy. The king also sent me army officers and cavalry. His reputation won him financial and military support. Now we look up here and we say, this must have been some parade coming from Susa to Jerusalem. He had timber for the city wall, for the house he was going to live in, and for the temple. We go on to our next screen. And we read 3:1, Eliashib, the high priest, helped me to rebuild. Now we have to compare this with an earlier version in Ezra 10:6. Ezra retired and went to the chamber of Johanan, son of Eliashib. Ezra came later under Eliashib's son Johanan. The 7th year of Artaxerxes I would be 458, which they often said Ezra came in 458. Artaxerxes II, the 7th year, would be 398, which we think is the time when he really came. Number 6:1, when Sanballat, Tobiah, and other enemies, Nehemiah had all sorts of enemies, probably because he was a eunuch, heard that the wall was finished, they called for a council. 6:3, I answered, I am busy and unable to come. They said, you are rebelling to become a king. Now notice, Nehemiah had kingly qualities, but his enemies used these qualities to horrify the priests and scribes. A eunuch for our king? We go on to our next screen, and we read, 6:10, I went to the house of Shemaiah, says Nehemiah. He said, let us meet in God's temple and lock the temple doors, for men are coming by night to kill you, Nehemiah. I said, a man like me take flight? Can a man like me enter the temple to save his life? A man like me, emphasis, I will not. I realized Shemaiah was bribed that I might commit sin, and then they would have a shameful story to discredit me. They wanted him to go into the temple and pollute the temple as a eunuch. Deuteronomy 23, eunuchs were excluded from the assembly of God's people. Nehemiah accepted that and obeyed it. We go on to our next screen and we read, the wall was finished in 52 days. Our enemies lost face, for they knew it was Yahweh's help that the work was completed. 7:2, I placed my brother Hanani over Jerusalem and Hananiah as commander of the citadel. The city was spacious, but it had a small population. Nobody would live there without a wall. God inspired me to gather the nobles and the people to examine their family records to see who were the earliest returnees who committed to live in Jerusalem. We go on to our next screen. The record listed the first exiles who returned from Babylon to Jerusalem. The scribes always had meticulous lists after exile. From the records, he lists all the names. So, 766, 42,360 assembled together. His Excellency, that's Nehemiah, put in 1,000 gold drachmas. Then certain families gave 20,000 gold drachmas. A safe central city brings out hidden wealth. Now we go to 8:2. The first day of the 7th month, Ezra the priest brought the law of Moses to be read to all. We go on to our next screen and we read. Ezra read from daybreak till noon and explained what he read. Then we go to verse 9. Then His Excellency Nehemiah and Ezra the priest and scribe said, today is holy to the Lord God. Do not be sad, but go eat rich food and drink, for rejoicing in the Lord must be your strength. Eucharist, for giving thanks to the Lord, is our strength. All celebrated with joy. We go on to our next screen and we read, Nehemiah's book gives the true historical order. Nehemiah first, then Ezra. But then Nehemiah looks like the restorer of Judah. So the chroniclers juxtapose the order to put Ezra first to make Ezra the new Moses and restorer of Judah. It was obvious that the humble kingdom of Judah would always need superachiever exiles like Nehemiah. Tiny Judah would never have finances and military help as Nehemiah was able to bring. Nehemiah is never again mentioned in Hebrew, but he becomes the model for superachiever exiles to help Jerusalem and Judah. We go on to our last screen and we read, Chronicles parallels the history of Israel's kingdom in 1 and 2 Samuel and 1 and 2 Kings. Why God inspired a re-editing of Israel's kingdom is essential to understanding how the Old and New Testament connect, and we will continue in our next segment. Thank you so much for joining us.
Father, for thy is the kingdom, the power and the glory. Have mercy upon us. Give us more blessings forever and ever.